You know, most people assume that the truth is the safest, most righteous path to take. That if you're telling the truth, you're automatically good, fair, trustworthy, and moral. But here is the unsettling twist, and I want you to listen closely, because this is where it gets truly dangerous. The truth in itself is neutral. It is like fire. It can warm a home or burn it to the ground depending on whose hands it's in. The most skilled manipulators don't waste time crafting lies. No, they understand something much deeper, something far more potent. They know the secret is not in deception, but in presentation. They use truth like a sculptor uses clay, like a weapon polished with just enough shine to blind when needed and just enough edge to cut when convenient. And that is what makes it so effective, because when someone hears something true, their defenses drop, their skepticism fades, and they begin to trust. You see, when a person lies, they run the risk of being caught. The entire scheme falls apart when the lie is exposed. All trust evaporates. But when the truth is used strategically, they are untouchable, undeniable, and even admired. And that is where the power lies, not in what is said, but in the careful calculation of how, when, and why it is said. It is like the cat. I remember this man. He was a consultant advising a major health organization, and I watched how he operated it. Fascinated me. He would walk into meetings and speak only facts, numbers, studies, timelines. And yet somehow, what he left out was louder than what he included. He would share rising recovery rates without mentioning the critical care drop-offs, highlight the success of new treatments while conveniently staying silent on the skyrocketing costs. And here was the most brilliant part. He always sounded honest because he was. His data was real, his findings solid. Everyone nodded in agreement because nothing he said was false, and yet the decisions made based on what he said ended up serving only one purpose: enhancing his agenda. This is the danger of manipulating with truth. It leaves no fingerprints. You cannot be accused of lying because everything you said was technically correct, and even if someone senses something is off, they can't quite prove it, because the trap wasn't in a false claim. The trap was in the frame. It was set up before they even knew they stepped into it. Why lie when the truth already does everything you need, if you know how to guide it, bend it, emphasize or minimize it? You see, skillful manipulation is not about fabrication, it is about curation. The truth is like a playlist. You choose the track list but never change the lyrics. When someone knows how to sequence it just right, the entire mood shifts. The whole story feels different. And people will follow voluntarily, without resistance, because they believe not just in the information, but in the integrity of its messenger. Now you might be wondering how someone even learns to do this, how they reach the level where truth becomes not just a value but a tool. And I'll tell you, it's not always sinister. Sometimes it starts as a survival strategy, in negotiation, in debate, or in business. You learn that precision influences perception. And before long, the habit becomes a craft, a calculated use of facts to lead, guide, nudge, control, and then a day arrives when you don't even need to lie anymore. You just learn what truths to tell and which ones to shelve. And isn't that 10 times more dangerous? Imagine facing someone who lies. You suspect them, you question them, you investigate, but imagine someone facing you with truth, with authenticated, provable information, and still manipulating the entire direction of your thoughts, your decisions, your loyalties. Would you even know it was happening? That's the brilliance and the terror of it. You don't fight it with facts because the facts are already on its side. The only way to fight it is with awareness, with discernment, with the understanding that not all truth is innocent, and not every honest voice is honorable. The truth in the wrong mouth is more lethal than a lie whispered with guilt. So when people say, speak the truth, stand in the truth, I say yes, but know this. The truth is not automatically virtuous. It only takes on meaning through motive, through intention, through the heart. That carries it, because the truth in the hands of someone with power and strategy becomes the most effective weapon ever forged. And in the end, what makes manipulation with truth so dangerous is that it requires no deception at all, only precision. Imagine you are looking at a painting, one that stirs something inside you, maybe awe, maybe sorrow, maybe trust. But what you may not realize is that your entire emotional response can be guided entirely by the frame that surrounds it. Not the art itself, but the way it is presented. And this is exactly how powerful framing is when it comes to truth. Now, this is important because most people think manipulation only happens when someone twists the facts or tells an outright lie. But the most dangerous kind is far more subtle and far more refined. It happens when the truth is framed in a very precise way, a way that controls the interpretation before the meaning has even reached your conscious mind. Because the truth does not speak for itself, not really. The truth needs a structure, it needs a container, and whoever chooses that container often controls the message, no matter how true the content is. I used to meet this executive. Every time we sat down for a conversation, he would tell me the truth, nothing but the truth. In fact, he prided himself on being radically transparent. But the fascinating part was that every time he spoke, his version of the truth felt like a movie. It had a build-up, a climax, a resolution. But only the parts he curated for maximum effect, he knew exactly how to position each fact so that it would generate the emotion he wanted to evoke, confidence, urgency, empathy, whatever the goal was. He would get there by leading you with carefully selected truths in an even more carefully chosen order. That's what framing really is. It is not about changing the facts. It is about changing the lens through which you see them. And once someone controls the lens, they don't just influence the way you see the truth. They influence how you feel about it, how you respond to it, and ultimately, what you are willing to do because of it. There was a story circulating some time ago, not fiction, but reported in legitimate media. A company celebrated having created 500 new jobs in a struggling economy. Everything they said was factual, accurate, uplifting, but here is where the frame steps in. What was never said was that those jobs came at the cost of closing down 3 other branches and relocating hundreds of workers, separating families and gutting local communities. And yet, because the message was timed right, with the right headlines and the right visuals, people cheered. They praised leadership. They accepted the narrative without ever realizing there was another, more painful layer beneath the truth they were given. This is how political campaigns run entire platforms built on framing statistics delivered with confidence but stripped of nuance, and resistant to data, real numbers, real events, but arranged like pieces on a chessboard to win a vote, not to inform the public, and the power of it is breathtaking. Because no one steps forward to question the facts, since the facts are real. The only manipulation was in the construction, and by the time most people recognize the trick, the moment has already passed. And the decision has already been made. Now think about this. Think about how often we assume that hearing the truth is enough. That if someone gives us the facts, we will naturally reach the right conclusion. But that is the illusion, because there is no such thing as a naked fact. Every detail arrives dressed in time and emphasis and tone, in body language, in intention, and until we learn to recognize the influence framing holds, we are vulnerable. We are dancing to a rhythm we did not know was playing. You see, a manipulator does not need to silence the truth. They simply dim certain parts and spotlight others. They learn timing and sequence. They hold back truths just long enough to let one narrative stick before releasing the rest, and by then it is too late, because once an idea has settled into the bloodstream of belief, it does not come out with more truth. It stays because of how it made you feel. And feelings, remember, stories, not facts. That is why you will hear one version of events from one source and an entirely opposite version from another, both rooted in truth, both technically aligned with facts, yet emotionally worlds apart. And that is not because someone lied, it is because they told their version in their order, in their frame. And the result can be as polarizing as light and darkness, and still completely true. So if you ever want to see who is really in control, do not just listen to what truths are being told. Pay attention to how and when they are told. Watch for the rhythm, the sequence, the missing links. Because the moment you break free from the hypnotic flow of a framed truth is the moment you no longer belong to its author. And when you no longer belong to their frame, you become the one who can see the whole picture, not just the part they wanted you to believe. There is something terrifyingly elegant about a person who can manipulate with the truth, especially when they do it in a way that leaves them untouchable, boxed in by facts but insulated by silence and suggestion. This is where we step into the realm of plausible deniability, and I want you to understand the sheer power that lives in this space, because it is subtle, calculated, and almost always invisible until it is too late. You see, what most people never realize is that the most effective form of control does not come from making false claims. It comes from presenting real pieces of truth while intentionally omitting the ones that matter most. And when you do it right, you never have to retreat, you never have to apologize, and you never have to admit anything at all. Plausible deniability is the perfect defense because it means you always have the ability to say, "I never lied," and you would be right. And yet somehow you still led someone or an entire group or even a nation exactly where you wanted them to go. Think about it like this. Imagine you walk into a dark room and someone hands you a flashlight but points you only toward one wall. Everything you see is true. Every shadow, every crack, every detail. But because you only see that wall, you begin to believe that wall is the whole room. What no one tells you is that behind you, behind your shoulders, just out of reach, is a doorway or a staircase or a fire you should know about. And none of it was hidden through lies. It stayed hidden in plain sight simply because you were never told to look. This is how public figures protect themselves without having to stoop to dishonesty. They release true statements, but make sure those statements exist in isolation, separate from the full picture. They give you data, but not context. Results, but not the methods. Outcomes, but never the sacrifices. And the beauty of it is that if you ever challenge them, they can turn and say, "What part of what I said was false?" And you will find yourself stuck, because technically nothing was false. And yet everything feels distorted. I once worked with someone who mastered this tactic. It was almost poetic. She would deliver her progress reports with grace and confidence, always highlighting real victories, real facts. But she would consistently leave out the parts where those victories came from cutting corners or pushing responsibilities onto others. She never claimed she did everything herself, and she wasn't lying about her results. But she presented her truth so carefully, so cleanly, that leadership saw her as a rising star, and no one thought to ask the other department how those results affected them. No one thought to ask what the cost was underneath the success. And she would walk out of those meetings untouchable, because her facts were solid and her silence was strategic. There is something dangerous about that level of precision, because it makes the user look innocent. It gives them a shield, not just of truth, but of innocence. People do not question those who tell the truth, or at least enough of it. And that is the spell plausible deniability casts. It protects the manipulator behind a wall of verifiable statements, while the real manipulation happens in what is left unsaid. And the danger only multiplies when this becomes a habit across systems, in organizations, in media, in politics. Multiple people speaking selectively, all aligned in their message, all factually correct, but cumulatively misleading. And when the time comes to find out what went wrong, there is no single lie to unravel, no untruth to attack, only a trail of half-illuminated corridors, where every lamp shines just enough light to stay credible but never enough to show the full flaw. Some of the most damaging narratives in our world are built not on falsehoods, but on half-truths. Hand-picked and stacked together in a way that creates an illusion, and by the time anyone realizes it, their reaction, the public response, the emotional weight of a story has already solidified. And even if later you present the missing pieces, you cannot scale it back, because truth, once framed, becomes belief, and belief rarely cares about revisions. And that is why people who manipulate with truth rarely see consequences. They are not liars in the traditional sense. They are orchestrators. They play reality like a symphony, hitting only the chords they want you to hear, letting silence fill in the parts that would change the tune. They stay clean because technically they never touch the dirt. And if someone tries to dig it up, they can stand back, raise their hands and say, "I never said that," or "I never claimed that," or "I only shared what I knew," and technically they would not be wrong, but that does not mean they were ever right. This is not just strategy, this is insulation, it is reputation, armor. And you will find the most sophisticated manipulators draped in it, because it disguises their moves behind the illusion of honesty and gives them an open door to walk away unscathed from messes they helped create. So understand this, the most powerful form of deception is not a lie spoken, but a truth weaponized through omission, and that is the silence you should fear the most because it does not echo and it cannot be traced. Now this is where it gets uncomfortable, because until this point we have talked about power, strategy, precision, how truth can be shaped and sharpened and used to move people to control outcomes, to protect yourself, and to dominate without ever saying a single false thing. But here is the question that none of us gets to escape. What are you willing to do with that power when you have it? Because this is not just about skill, this is about choice. It is easy to talk about manipulation like it is some dark art that belongs only to corrupt leaders or corporate puppeteers or smooth-talking politicians, but the truth is much closer to home. The truth is, we all do it at different levels in different ways, and sometimes we do it for good reasons. We say, I was just trying to protect them, or I did not want to cause worry, or I needed to keep the team motivated. But the line between influence and exploitation is not always loud and flashing, sometimes it is whisper thin. There was a man I met years ago, brilliant, persuasive, sharp as a knife. He used truth, like a stage actor uses silence, like timing, like drama. You never caught him lying because he never had to, and at first I found it admirable he could make a room say yes with just a few words, because everything he said came wrapped in honesty, or at least enough honesty to satisfy the surface. But over time I started seeing the results, not in the victories, not in the metrics, but in the people, broken, burned out, manipulated gently by truth, never screamed at, never forced, but led, in such a way that they could never quite point their finger at what was wrong. And that is when I realized, it is not the strategy that is dangerous. It is the intent behind it. Intent is the difference between leadership and control, between service and supremacy, and you can use all of these tactics we have talked about: framing, omission, precision, timing, and if your heart is right, it can help things grow. It can bring clarity. It can unite a group and move a cause forward. But if your heart is off even slightly, then you are no longer guiding, you are bending reality. And you may still be using truth, but it is not for the sake of others, it is for the sake of your own shadow. And let me tell you from experience, the most dangerous people in any room are not the liars, the schemers, the ones who brag about their manipulation. They are the ones who smile softly and speak factually and control emotionally while always staying just inside the boundaries of truth. They are hard to catch because they do not need to hide, but you will feel it if you are paying attention. You will feel it in the way your opinions begin to shift, in the way you second-guess your own instincts, in the way the room seems to orbit around them without anyone calling it out. And the scariest part is, they could be doing it for what they believe is the right reason. This is where ethics collapses under pressure, because we humans are incredible at justifying ourselves. We say, I did it for the greater good, or they needed to be steered, or they were not ready for the full truth, and before we know it, we have crossed a line and started managing people not by their freedom, but by our control. We are not helping them understand, we are deciding what they get to understand, and if you are not careful, you will build an entire system, a culture, a family, a business, based on half-truths that support your comfort, not the whole truth that demands your accountability. I am not here to tell you to never use strategy, or to share every thought in your head, or to abandon message crafting. None of that is realistic, and none of that is leadership. What I am saying is this: you better make sure you check your motive every single time, because when the truth becomes a tool, and that tool is in your hands, you are responsible for where you aim it. And when you aim it wrong or pretend not to, the damage you cause may be clean, undetectable, even justified in your mind, but it is damage nonetheless. So now, ask yourself, when you speak truth, when you shape it, maybe shorten it, maybe delay it, maybe emphasize only part of it, why are you doing it? Is it because you are afraid? Is it because you want power? Is it because you think they cannot handle the full thing? Or is it because you want the truth to land well so it can grow something, not break something? Those are two very different motives, and only you can answer that honestly. Because the truth in itself is not virtuous, only the intention behind it can be, and the most dangerous manipulators are the ones who forget that line even exists. And that is why truth used without a conscience is far more dangerous than any lie ever told.